Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast that always sounds best if you take it out, blow on it, and then put it back in. I'm Alex Greenwood, and joining me is my permanent co-host, Stu Jocelyn. Stu, how are you?
Oh, hi mate, I'm very good, thanks, and glad to hear that our contractual issues have finally been resolved. We have thrashed this out with Jeff over the last couple of weeks, and pleased to finally be in the seat permanently. I'm not sure why I wasn't in the first place, to be honest. Was it that you were just a bit worried that it might all go a bit wrong with me and, might need to replace me, so it'd be easier to put me in as a, as a temporary co-host to begin with?
Yeah, exactly. I was sort of hedging my bets for a while there after Christmas, and just, I was monitoring the situation closely, but I think the last couple of episodes you've really excelled, so...
Well, rightly so, and I hope I've proved that now, and we can put this behind us and move on together.
The situation with Californication Gate did take quite a while to,
it did.
be flushed out of the system,
and
I think it's been long enough now. So your name's in pen.
We're none of us perfect, are we? All make mistakes, but nothing as high profile has happened since. So glad to be here and start a new era in the pod, definitely.
Excellent. You've just been to the cinema, am I right in thinking that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I went to the cinema on my own this afternoon to watch the new Super Mario Brothers movie because wife of the pod, Beth, nor any of my friends were interested in watching it with me. So I decided to go and take a look at it myself. The biggest thing I've come away with is don't go and watch a movie that is meant for children on your own as a 34-year-old man.
In the Easter holidays.
In the Easter holidays, yes, as well. It didn't really click with me that was what would happen. But I'll give the film a solid 3 out of 5. I think the children will probably get more out of it than I will. I was only there for the references, really, But yes, it was a bit of an experience. I like to concentrate on movies and look for little things and make sure that I'm in the moment. And to have a kid sat next to me who commentated on the whole thing to his dad all the way through it and had the noisiest snacks that was possible to probably buy. Really took the shine off for me. So I won't be doing that again, or at least if I do, it'll be to go and watch a film which has little interest for younger people. The last time I did this during a holiday, I went to watch the film The Phantom of the Open. Do you know this one with Mark Rylance as Maurice Flitcroft? And there were only about 3 of us in the screen, so I thought, fantastic, this is the way forward. But clearly not. But anyway, if any of you out there are Mario fans of old and you have kids, then definitely go and catch the Super Mario film because it will be good for you, definitely.
Right. Well, it was an apt film for you to have seen today because, of course, we will be discussing the computer games of 1995 in a bit. Before that, we don't actually have a sponsor this time, Stu. But we do for a change. We have a cheat code today. So if you press up, left, down, circle on whichever device you're using to listen to us on, you will be able to listen to the podcast with unlimited ammo. So that's up, left, down, circle, and that will get you unlimited ammo for the rest of the episode. So make the most of that. I won't be reading out again, but you're of course welcome to rewind and pause it and get that written down. But that's the cheat code for today's episode.
But if the listener, uses their unlimited ammo on both of us, then does that mean then that there's nobody left to present the rest of the episode, or are we?
We have invincibility.
We have invincibility.
As default.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So that's fine. All right.
We cannot be defeated so easily.
Like Dr. Robotnik.
Exactly. We're breaking the mold today, aren't we, Stu? In that we are planning ahead for a change. We actually know what we're going to be doing in a few months' time. So this is in regards to our summer party episode. Last year, obviously, we played a couple of board games, or maybe just one board game with Dad of the Pod and Joey Jojo in the Three Crowns in Chippenham.
Yep, I've spoken to the Three Crowns, and they're more than happy to let us have the back bar again for the summer party. So we'll consider that a booking once we get a date.
Fantastic. But we're not going to be playing a board game this time, are we? We think we are going to do a quiz, a 90s themed quiz. We're going to put something together and we're going to hopefully have some live guests in the studio, in the pub with us to do the quiz itself. But also we want to make it something that can be interactive for our listeners. So we're going to read it out, and then we will read the answers out within the quiz, within the episode, I think. But we want you to play along and be honest and give us your scores. We'll work out the details closer to the time, but part of this will involve a prize, of course, like all good quizzes.
Yep.
And we are collating those prizes as we speak, aren't we, Stu? I think you have something
we are
early for the quiz pile. I mean, prize pile.
I just wanted to go through a few things that I'm willing to donate from my own 90s collection. So I went round to my folks' house the other day and had a look in my old bedroom cupboard to see what was there. And it was trove, veritable trove, it has to be said. And I've got a little something especially for you here as well, which I managed to find, which I thought Alex has to have that. That can't go in the giveaway pile. Okay, so first of all, we have a brace of Viz comics. We have the December 95 issue and then the February 96 issue. So I've got both of these here. I just want to note a couple of things out of the February 96 issue. First of all, I don't know if you can see this. There's an advert here for Admiral Insurance, a print ad for Admiral Insurance. Now, when I say Admiral Insurance to you, what do you think of in terms of advertising?
I think of the Admiral Nelson sort of character with the eyeglass thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Telescope, yeah.
It was a bit more basic back in 1996. I don't know if you can see that. It says there, cheaper car insurance. Are you over 21? Do you want more money for booze and fags? Give Admiral Insurance a call. Now,
there's a really phallic image. I can't work out what...
I know. Every time I look at it, it's a man holding a cigarette to his mouth, but it definitely looks like something else.
And it's really close up, so all we can see is the moustache and the cigarette and the chin. That must be intentional. That's unbelievable, that advert.
I know. So we can't be held responsible for the content of these Viz magazines, by the way. There's an article here which describes Mick Jagger as a rock and roll senior citizen. And bear in mind, this was printed nearly 30 years ago. And on the back, lovely print ad for Boddington's The Cream of Manchester there.
Fantastic.
So that's the first couple of things from the giveaway pile. Next, genuine South Park tie.
Very nice.
I actually wore this when I performed in my Year 6 Leavers play. Which was proved in a photograph I saw recently. So there's your South Park tie with Chef at the bottom there.
So that's not just like nostalgia in and of itself. It's got some meaning and some significance to this show and you.
It
personally.
Does. And as such, I think I might keep it. Come to think of it, I'll have a think about that. But there's plenty more here. I've got an action figure here of Lieutenant Brogan from Space Precinct, which was a one-series sci-fi program that aired on BBC Two in the middle of the decade, just after The Simpsons. Officer Jack Haldane was my favourite character. Diamond Joe Barter will tell you that because we used to watch it together. And I had him as well, but Brogan was the only one I could find. So I'm very happy for him to marshal the giveaway pack as it goes to its new home. Let's see what we've got. We've got some CD singles. We've got Rendezvous 98 by Jean-Michel Jarre and Apollo 440. This was the theme tune for ITV's World Cup coverage of France 98. So we've got that on CD single. A band very close to my heart, Stereophonics. This is the I Wouldn't Believe Your Radio live EP from Morpher Stadium, which, if you remember, was one of the live gigs I said I wish I could have gone to in the 90s when we did our live music episode.
Yeah.
So 3 tracks there from the Morpher Stadium gig. And we've also got Tarantino's New Star by a boy band called North and South, who had their own TV show on CBBC called No Sweat. I don't know if you recall this.
Oh, the name sounds familiar.
Yeah, but they were a thing for a while. I mean, their big song was No Sweat. This was the follow-up, which didn't do as well. But for some reason, I've got that on CD single. So there we go. I'll throw that in.
There can't be many of those around either.
I don't think that. It could be worth something. You never know. We've got the Craig Charles Almanac of Total Knowledge, which is a sort of TV cash-in book, which was released in, let me have a look here, 1993. And there's all sorts of funny stuff in here from Craig Charles, which I must have picked up at a boot sale, I think, or something along those lines. I've also got some football programmes. Arsenal versus Panathinaikos from the Champions League. Wednesday the 30th of September 1998, played at Wembley Stadium, no less. Bolton Wanderers versus Coventry City from the Premiership, December 30th, 1995. And Aston Villa versus Arsenal, Sunday the 10th of May 1998. So these are all from my programme collection. I didn't actually go to any of these games. I've just got hold of the programmes, again, probably from a boot sale. Why I picked up the Arsenal and the Bolton ones, I don't know, is anybody's guess. And probably the pièce de résistance, and we might actually mention this later. I'm going to throw in NFL Game Day on PlayStation 1.
Oh, wow.
So that's all there. Manual, disc, everything. And even a Pink Planet Games Exchange sticker there on the inside cover. And this won one of the awards, I think, in '95, which we might go through in a minute. So I'm going to throw that in. So that's a little package I've put together. Basically, it's a good way of getting old stuff out of my wardrobe and getting rid of it and getting it out of the house. But I hope our quiz winner enjoys that. Now, I said I had something for you. I realise I've been talking for a long time now, so I will make this short. I found this again in my programme collection. It's a copy of Canary.
Oh, nice.
And this is from, we'll step out in the 90s for a second. It's from the 20th of October 1979. Norwich City versus Manchester City. So this is all the way from Carrow Road. And I'll keep hold of that for you, mate, and I'll pass it on to you next time I see you.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay? Little Norwich programme there from 1979.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Oh, no problem.
I'm already a winner. We haven't even done the quiz. I'm a winner.
All we have to do now is write the quiz.
Yeah, that's true.
So that somebody can win all this stuff. We haven't actually mentioned that we spent a lovely day in each other's company recently.
We did, yes.
I think that's worth covering, is it not?
Absolutely, yeah. We went to see the return leg, I suppose, return for me, leg of the pod derby between Corsham Town and Mangotsfield United. And then followed shortly after with a lovely curry. And I witnessed at least one song of Stu's band set, which was, what was the venue again?
You saw the sound check and one song, which is more than enough for anybody watching my band. So we were playing at the Trout in Keynsham. So we took the opportunity to drive down, and we were driven by listener to the pod, Ian. So yes. Thanks again, Ian, for that. And we actually had we were escorted by a Vauxhall Carlton all the way into Keynsham, weren't we, as well?
Which was
brilliant.
Yeah.
Sat and had a nice curry together. Then we went down to the Trout to wait for my bandmates to turn up, where we watched a documentary about the IRA with the sound down.
I've forgotten about that. Yeah. It was sobering, wasn't it? Ironically, it was quite sobering in a pub to have that on in the background.
Indeed. But it was lovely to spend the day together, and yeah, thanks for coming out, mate. I'm sorry that the mighty Mangoes couldn't repay the defeat at Corsham earlier in the season. One more thing, by the way, while we are talking about Corsham Town and the podcast is happy to put their name to and sponsor the charity match that's happening for an old coach of mine, John Bolland, who sadly has recently been diagnosed with dementia. But we're having a charity game down at Corsham Town, actually on the 30th of April. So probably around the time this podcast comes out, probably just after, actually, thinking about it. But we're going to have some advertising in the programme. I'm going to be there on the day. I'm going to be playing some live music in the bar after the game. I'll probably get involved on the pitch as well in some sort of capacity if I can inveigle my way in somewhere. But just to say, we're really proud to be taking part and supporting that event as well down at Corsham Town.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a great cause, and we're absolutely happy to contribute in any way that we can. So I hope the match goes well, and it's a good day out for everyone who goes. So
I'll report back. No worries. Time once again for What's the Most 90s, and we're going to the dark side this time. Alex, what do you think is the most 90s criminal act? And by that I mean a famous example of a criminal act taking place as opposed to a criminal act in and of itself.
Yes, it was a good question. Quite hard to keep it light. I found it hard to keep it light anyway, because everything that came to my mind was quite a serious crime. And actually, it is a serious crime that I've gone for. I was considering the murders of Tupac and Biggie Smalls in 96 and 97. in LA, but I didn't go for that in the end. I went for the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman in June 1994, probably better known as the O.J. Simpson case.
Yes.
It just seemed like certainly the biggest celebrity-based crime I could think of in the 90s. I mean, it was pretty big in the UK, I think, but in America, it was massive. It was, and it's like kind of fed into the public consciousness ever since. The live car chase on the American TV channels. There was the trial being all televised in a way that you don't get in the UK, and then the verdicts being a massive scandal and sort of resonating through all the years since. And the fact that O.J. Simpson was already a celebrity. He's in the Naked Gun films, of course, that we've discussed on this podcast before, and probably more famous for that than being a American football player. Although I guess that's for us because we don't really watch American football so much in this country, but still, big actor. So yeah, all those things combined, I just thought that feels like the most prominent, at least celebrity-based crime, but one of the biggest news stories of the 90s. So that's what I've gone for. It is obviously a horrible crime that happened, and it's often overlooked that those two people, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were killed. But yeah, it was just the biggest crime I could think of. So that's why I've gone for it. What about you? I'm
fairly sure OJ released a book 10 years ago, I don't know, called If I Did It, This Is How, or something like that.
Yeah.
Where he says, I definitely didn't do it, but if I did do it, this is how I would do it. And that didn't really sit well with me. I don't know.
No. I think you're right there. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I'm sure that happened. So I've gone for Nick Leeson and the collapse of Barings Bank in 1995. Now, I can't pretend to understand this. I've had a look at the background of it, and to put it simply, he was covering up errors that had been made, and then he realised that he could use this account that could be used to correct errors that the bank made in order to hide varying levels of activity. And in the end, he caused the collapse of Barings Bank, which was the UK's oldest merchant bank at the time. So I remember this bit again being a huge story. And one thing I remembered in particular, and I don't know where I picked this up from, when I saw it on TV at the time, and I would have been 7 or 8, so I'm not sure how this stuck in my mind, but that a brewery produced a beer called Leeson Lager, which had the name as it had his picture on the label. And I thought I'd look this up to see if I hadn't dreamt this, and I did actually find a website with a picture of a bottle of Leeson Lager on it. Probably the world's most expensive beer, it says on the label, with a picture of Nick Leeson on there. Limited to 100 cases and brewed by a Hong Kong brewery in 1995. So yeah, he went to prison in Singapore for bringing the bank down. And in recent years, he was the chief operating officer of Galway United in the League of Ireland. So wow, there you go. That's what happened to Nick Leeson after that.
He's still up to, well, not up to no good, but I mean, he's still operating. I thought those sort of crimes often led to people being put in prison for sometimes you get news stories where someone's done something and they get like a 400-year prison sentence or something. I thought it might have been like that, but
no, he does TED Talks and everything.
Does it?
So yeah, he's still very much active. And there was a film, Rogue Trader, which was obviously made about the whole thing as well. In terms of the criminal act I most associate with the 90s, yeah, I had to go for Nick Leeson and Barings Bank.
Nice. It sort of feels a bit like a precursor to the collapse of 2008 and 2009 and Bernie Madoff and all those things and insider trading and stuff. It was like a sign of things to come, unfortunately. But yeah,
indeed.
There you go. Good choice.
So what do we put in the ledger?
I honestly don't know. They are both such iconic 90s crimes, and they're both massive in their own way.
Only one's got its own beer.
That's true. Okay,
I'm
let's
sorry.
go
We
for it.
shouldn't be making light of the O.J. Simpson case. I do apologise, everybody.
No, that's fine. I think it's got to be Nick Leeson, just because of we're going to use our British bias, I think, here, and
Okay.
and go for that one. So I'm happy to put that in the ledger.
Okay.
Time now for the main topic of conversation for today's episode, which is, of course, the games of 1995. So we're going to be doing this as a series, much like we have done with the films, although we're not going to be doing them in order like we've done with the films. We're going to do them at sort of random order for various reasons, and we're starting right in the middle of the decade with 1995. So there'll be episodes for each year coming up over the next few months. But yeah, starting with 95. So Stu, what was your gaming landscape like in '95? I'm assuming you were well into games by this point.
Absolutely. Well, at the time, we still only had the Mega Drive. So the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation were both released in this year, but both came later. Famously, my dad, when faced with the decision between getting the Saturn or the PlayStation, decided to stick with what he knew and went with the Sega Saturn. But then eventually we had both simultaneously. But 1995, definitely the Mega Drive was still the main console in our house. I remember trying to set it up on my own with my friend James Topping, and getting it totally wrong, screwing the TV up, and my mum being really upset because I'd not set it up properly and lost all the channels on the TVs. So had to wait until Dad got home to sort it out. But yeah, definitely the Mega Drive. I will be talking about one PlayStation game, one Sega Saturn game, and one Mega Drive game actually. So that covers all of the consoles, main consoles from that year. Obviously, some of the games I would have played a little bit later, but they came out in 95. So yeah. I hope people will forgive me for that.
I think that's absolutely fine. That's something we have to do a lot on this podcast, as we both were very young at the start of the 90s. So what's important is the release date, I think, and yeah, when we played them is okay. We got some leeway there.
Great.
I was very much in the Amiga phase of my life here, as was the whole family. That was our computer at the time. It was probably an Amiga 600 or 1200 at this point, maybe a 1200. As you say, PlayStation was released this year, but we didn't get one until I think the middle of 97. So yeah, very much Amiga. I think I've got a selection of games here that they're not all Amiga based, but yeah, we'll come to that in a second. Before we get to that though, we'll just have a quick look at some of the award winners and the biggest sellers of the year. So in terms of award winners, it seems to me like it's not like the Oscars with films where there's one big award ceremony or a couple of big award ceremonies. There seem to be quite a lot, but the ones that I sort of scanned over, the big winners seem to be Virtua Fighter 2, Tekken 2, and Twisted Metal. So I don't really know Twisted Metal. I know the name maybe, but it's not a game I'm familiar with.
I think it was a Destruction Derby type racing game, but maybe with a bit more of a violent edge. I think.
Yeah, okay. And the other two, obviously, very famous fighting games, one of which will be getting mentioned in a bit in more detail. And then in terms of the biggest sellers, in the UK, the biggest selling game, this was both on CD-ROM and cartridge, was FIFA Soccer 96, so FIFA 96. And the other sales are divided between CD-ROM and cartridge. So there's not one list, but the other big sellers are Destruction Derby, FIFA 95, so they're still selling a lot of the previous year's game there. Command and Conquer, The Lion King, Theme Park, Mortal Kombat 3, Wipeout, Tekken 1, Micro Machines Turbo Tournament 96, and a couple of other things. There's something called Mickey Mania, which I'm assuming was a Disney game, and Killer Instinct, which I've never heard of, but they were the big UK sellers. And then in the US, where it does have one list, number one was Mortal Kombat 3, then Donkey Kong Country, then Killer Instinct, that game I just mentioned, and then some other things in there like The Lion King, and Mortal Kombat 2 actually still selling very well. So obviously Mortal Kombat was a massive franchise back then, has died down a hell of a lot since then, but yeah, still going strong back in 95. So they were the big sellers anyway. Yeah, so SNES was the biggest selling console in the world in 1995, just ahead of the new Sony PlayStation and then the Sega Saturn. And the Mega Drive was still there in force. So the Saturn and the Mega Drive combined were selling more than Nintendo and Sony. So it was all pretty close back then. There were three big names in the home console landscape. So that's how everything looked globally in terms of sales and awards. We'll move on now to our own personal choices. We've each picked three, as we often do with these sort of episodes.
Yep.
Stu, do you want to go first with your choice for your first game?
I can. And where better to start than at the very top of the UK sellers list? We've already mentioned it. I've got to go for FIFA 96. So we moved house in 1996, and the house we moved into had a sort of a prefabricated summer house kind of thing in the back garden. It's no longer there. My parents got rid of it, but I inherited that as a as a little place, an area where I could where I could go and do stuff maybe with my friends and things like that. When it wasn't being used as just a general storage space, as I found it to be quite often. But when we got other consoles like the Saturn and the PlayStation, I was allowed to take the Mega Drive out into the little summer house building because it had power out there, and an old TV. It was actually the black and white TV that I got from my grandparents' kitchen when they finally replaced it. So we had some black and white Mega Drive action going on out in the summer house. And FIFA 96 was one of the games that I used to play. Now, for all of the games I'm going to talk about, I've had a little look at some playthroughs on YouTube because I haven't seen them for years, and I just wanted to get a feel of how they used to be. And one of the first things that I noticed about FIFA 96 is that your old friend Rashidi Yekini makes an appearance in the opening titles.
Oh, nice!
With his famous USA '94 celebration in the back of the net. So he's there. Jason McAteer on the cover with an unidentified Dutch player. Obviously, there was different players on the cover every year, and I just loved it. So this was the first game that I was able to use to customize teams. So you could go in and change the pick a random team and then change the kit colours and the names, and I set up a team with all of my classmates from primary school in it. Obviously jacked up everybody's stats to to be the maximum that they could be, and then destroyed everybody, as you do when you're that age, and you discover that function on a football game. So really enjoyed that. I also remember when you scored a goal, you could then press the ABC buttons on the Mega Drive pad, and it would do different things like in the background while you were celebrating. So one would be like a drum, so you could tap out a drum beat. The other one would be the sound of some fireworks. The other one would make the crowd cheer. So just different things that you could make the game do after you scored a goal. And I think that lasted in FIFA for a little while, actually, for a few years, that function, sort of little Easter egg there. And it was probably my first real experience of playing and sticking with a FIFA game and playing it for a long time, and I did do for a long time after that. My biggest one was actually FIFA 2000, which I played a lot on the PC, but we can't talk about that, obviously. And it was a love affair that lasted with FIFA for quite a while. So I'll go with FIFA 96 on the Mega Drive as my opening game. I had to mention it, because it was the biggest seller in the UK, as we've said, and probably quite rightly so, and it was just such a formative experience in terms of playing football games on a console. It was the first one that I really got stuck into. We've spoken about European club soccer before, I think, which I mentioned as having came with the Mega Drive, but it wasn't really that playable, whereas FIFA 96 was playable for someone of my age at the time anyway. And just a great game. Yeah,
I never played it. I was never into the FIFA games really, because I don't think they were on the Amiga. I was still playing Sensible World of Soccer and probably a bit of Kickoff 2 at this point on the Amiga, both top-down sort of football games. Was FIFA 96 more 3D one when you're a more traditional sort of view?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. It must have been one. Do you know when the first FIFA game was? Was it 95 or was it way earlier than that?
I think it was. I remember there being one called FIFA International Soccer, which had David Platt on the cover, which we had. which we bought later, and I had it because it was there and it was, cheap.
Yeah.
But we must be. I don't think any earlier than 94. I don't think.
Mm. And
I think maybe 95 was the first one that had 90 the year in the title.
Yeah, and we're still going strong with FIFA 23. I imagine is probably what's being played now. So.
Well, yeah, but they're dropping the whole FIFA thing soon, aren't they?
Oh,
I think
yeah,
it's just going to be EA Football or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, this is the end of an era.
Yeah, the FIFA brand has become so toxic that even
so
the games
tainted,
don't want on there.
They don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, good choice. I'm glad you brought that up and gave it its due. It is like probably one of the best selling computer game franchises of all time. So this is an early iteration of it. So yeah, nice one. So my first choice has been mentioned as well a bit earlier, and I'm being a bit cheeky here because it's Tekken 2. Now this wasn't released on the PlayStation 1 until the following year, 96, but I see your eyebrows going up there, Stu. It was released worldwide in arcades in 1995.
Okay.
So I'm having it.
I've actually got one myself, which falls under that same bracket later on.
Okay.
So I will fully get behind it.
Yeah. Developed by Namco, of course, one of the iconic Japanese gaming developers. A big arcade game, obviously more so than consoles, I think, because this was obviously in the era when it's just sort of the crossover period, isn't it, where arcades were starting to be overtaken by home consoles, or were about to be overtaken by home consoles, because up until this point, the arcades were where you would go for the more powerful systems and the 3D games and the stuff you just couldn't do at home.
Yep.
And then obviously the PlayStation came along, and a little bit later, the Saturn in the same year, and things became 3D. Because that was something that I remember when the PS1 came out. I remember people saying, "Oh, you can play Ridge Racer on this. You don't have to go to the arcade. It's powerful enough to play Ridge Racer." Which, looking back at it now, seems sort of quaint, but it really was this changing of eras. So Tekken 2 sort of being an example of that, because it was a 3D fighting game, whereas up to this point I'd been playing Street Fighter 2. I played a lot of Street Fighter 2 with my brother on the Amiga throughout the early 90s. But then this was like a step up. It really felt like a step up, having the 2D, the 3D graphics. But it was a great game. Had great characters, good music. I loved the way that when you scored a KO, they'd do a little instant replay of the KO in slow motion, and they'd have this echo over the sound of someone getting knocked out. And yeah, I think it was a really playable fighting game. I think maybe it was on Demo 1 or some demo disc. That's where I would have first played it. And just played it over and over again, and then eventually borrowed the full game or bought it. And I just think, it was a cool game. Yoshimitsu was my favorite character. Mm-hmm. Always used him when I could for all the Tekken games. And so that's why I've chosen it, really. It feels like it represents the changing of the landscape of games. That's why I've chosen it.
Okay. I don't know an awful lot about Tekken. I remember when Tekken 3 came out in the early 2000s, and my friend Rosalie, who I was friends with in sort of year 7 and year 8, was very much into Tekken, and I used to pretend that my favorite Tekken character was Paul Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
Is that the name? Yeah.
Yeah.
And she hated Paul Phoenix, so for whatever reason. So I always used to pretend that, I really love Paul Phoenix. I like to play with him on Tekken 3. A vague memory. I think we might have had Virtua Fighter 2 on the Saturn a bit later on, and I remember playing that a little bit. But that's really as far as my one-on-one fighting game knowledge goes, I'm afraid. But I really obviously appreciate how big Tekken was and why you've chosen it.
Yeah, you were famously a lover, not a fighter, when it came to gaming, weren't you?
Still am. These things don't change. You know what I
mean? Well, let's see if your second choice reflects that. What is your second game?
Well, we keep mentioning each other's games. So I've gone for Ridge Racer Revolution for my second choice. a bit of a cheat again. Released in May '96 for the PS1, but it was released in 1995 on other platforms. So I'm having it, as you said earlier on. I think this actually came with our PlayStation, either as part of the bundle or in the box. I'm not too sure, but I remember it being there at the start, along with Demo 1, of course, the famous Demo 1, again, has already been mentioned.
Official demo disc of the pod.
And it was the first game, it must have been the first game that I ever played on the PlayStation, because it was the one that came with it. So I've got a sort of special place in my heart for Ridge Racer Revolution, really. I remember being very impressed at the way the outside would change from day to night and back to day again while you were racing. But it was obviously very quick. So, you know, are we on a planet where the days and nights are really quick, or is this racing been really sped up, or what's happening here? But it would happen sort of 5 or 6 times a race. The sun would go down and it would become night, and then the sun would come back up again.
Yeah,
I remember being impressed by that. The other thing, again, I hadn't remembered until I went back and had a look on YouTube, was that while the game was loading, there would be like a Space Invaders type thing that you could play.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you recall this. So it would be just like a totally different game within a game. And while you were waiting for Ridge Racer to load on the PlayStation, you could literally play Space Invaders or a variant thereof, which I'd completely forgotten about.
Yeah, I always thought that was a really great idea, because it was, especially back then, you had to wait ages for stuff to load. Mm-hmm. So to have something to do while you're doing it was amazing. I don't know why they don't do that. I suppose because stuff loads so quickly now, I don't need it. But yeah, that was genius.
So did that happen in the arcade version as well? Because as you said with Tekken, this Ridge Racer was originally an arcade game, which then got ported over onto PlayStation. So I don't know if the Space Invaders thing was part of the arcade experience as well, or whether it was a necessary thing to do while the game was loading because it took so long. Yeah, I don't know. But always enjoyed that aspect of it anyway. And because it was the first PlayStation game probably that I ever played on our own PlayStation. Ridge Racer Revolution has to be there for me.
Yeah, good choice. It would have been one of the first games I ever saw on the PlayStation. Maybe it was on a demo disc as well. Maybe on demo 1, like you say. Mm-hmm. And it was really, I think, represented that dawn of the new 32-bit era, because it was an arcade game that you could play at home, and it was a really iconic arcade game. Ridge Racer still is sort of synonymous with arcades more than consoles. Obviously, it's been overtaken now by games like Gran Turismo and I don't know, iRacing, Project Gotham, all those other racing games that have come out since. So it's a bit of its time and lost in the 90s. But yeah, just cool. It just oozes cool.
I only knew Gran Turismo out of those 3 you said. Then I must be out of touch. I must be I must be out of touch with the whole scene. I think Project Gotham.
I don't know. Maybe I've embarrassed myself. I couldn't think. I thought I was going to be able to name loads of modern racing games then, but then they were the only 2 that came to my mind. So
can someone younger and cooler write in, please, and let us know what the hip racing games are? Forza.
That's what I was trying to think of.
Right. Okay. Forza. Right. Thank God for that.
All right, we're starting to sound old now. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's get. Come on.
3, 2, 1, go!
I'm going for Gloom, which was a game released on the Amiga in '95, obviously. So yeah, Stu, when you think of first-person shooters set in a sci-fi landscape that rhymes with room, I'm sure you probably think Gloom, don't you? That's the first game that comes to your mind, and nothing else.
I'm afraid I'm with Innes on this one. I think I would say Doom. Not that I've ever played it, but I'm afraid to say I'm showing how uncool I am. I hadn't actually heard of Gloom until you messaged me and said that was going to be one of your games.
This was very much an Amiga clone of Doom, in an era when I think it was pretty much accepted that people would just develop clones of other games, because this was like, it wasn't just known as a clone of Doom. It was really highly respected in its day. You know, it won loads of awards. It had really great ratings in the Amiga magazines, and yeah, it was really respected and was sort of on lists for best games of the year. So people would just overlook the fact that it was a complete rip-off of an existing game, which I kind of quite like. But we didn't play Doom, we didn't have it, we didn't have a PC, so we bought Gloom. It was an early game we had on the Amiga, and like I said, it was set in a sci-fi landscape, first-person shooter, had really good sound effects, quite squelchy sound effects, because there were two settings you could have on Gloom. There was messy and meaty, and I've written a quote here from Wikipedia. If messy graphics are enabled, enemies explode more violently but then disappear quickly, whereas in the meaty graphics mode, the body parts from defeated enemies will remain on the floor where they died until the level is completed. And bearing in mind that we would have played this in, when I was 10 and my brother would have been about 13, I'm slightly surprised we were allowed to play it, because I was watching a playthrough on YouTube before this, and it is quite graphic. When you shoot people, and I think they're supposed to be humans, the people you're shooting, they look like humans. They do explode, and their body parts are quite recognizable, like as to what they're supposed to represent, and they do just lie on the floor. And there's some great sound effects as well. I'll put in a clip. But another thing I think that is of an era, and it went on for a lot longer than this, but having like 3 or 4 sound effects throughout a game that would just repeat constantly, because they didn't have enough different sound files in the library. So you'd be, especially a game like this where you're shooting dozens and dozens of people per level, just to get those 3 or 4 different sounds for shooting someone constantly going on and on. It's kind of amusing when you watch the playthrough again. But it was good fun, and it was kind of scary because it had good visuals, good atmosphere, and it just reminded me of playing Amiga and getting games when they came in big cardboard boxes with proper art on the front.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Which I think is sadly missed. Yeah, so it was a good, fun, squelchy, violent first-person shooter, which may or may not have shamelessly ripped off another computer game from the 90s. So that's my second choice, Gloom.
So it's like when ALDI wins Supermarket of the Year, despite the fact that if you go in there, they've got the same products in the same packaging, but just with slightly different names.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay.
ALDI is the Gloom of supermarkets.
And there's your title. So I remember playing a game that sounds like a similar sort of game, which was called Carmageddon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this had 2 different modes as well, where it was sort of safe and then maybe a more splattery mode. But it involved running over zombies in a car, as far as I can recall. But yeah, no, it sounds like a great choice. Yeah. And I look forward to hearing the sound effects as well.
Okay, what's your third choice then?
I'm going for another game which you would find in an arcade still today. I still head for this game in an arcade if I ever find myself in one. Normally on the Isle of Wight when I'm over there with the band, and we've got some time to kill. We normally head to the arcade, and the first thing I tend to jump on, if available, is Sega Rally Championship. So this is from December '95. It hit the Saturn as a port over from the arcade, and it was just amazing to have an arcade game in the home. It happened again with a bit later on. They did the Manx TT Superbike game. Of course, that's the one in the arcade where you're actually on the bike. And which again is brilliant fun. And I loved it. And I have to ask you, if you've ever played Sega Rally Championship, which I presume you have at some point, do you go for the Toyota Celica or the Lancia Delta Integrale?
I think back in the day, I probably would have gone for the Celica, but now I'd go for the Lancia.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're 2 of the coolest rally cars of all time. So
I know, right? Yeah.
It's hard to choose.
It's a difficult choice, definitely. And yeah, it's. I think it's an iconic game. It was probably one of the first of its kind. That actually came over and made the jump from being so successful in the arcades over to the consoles. It's a little bit when I look back on it now. There's like a couple of tracks and there's only a couple of cars to play, so maybe playability isn't quite there. I think if you're good at it, you're probably over and done with it in about an hour, I would say, as long as you can sort of hit the checkpoints and everything, because it's still based on a checkpoint system. You still got time that runs down, and if you miss it, you have to start all over again. So I had to go for Sega Rally Championship as one of the big games of '95, both in the arcade and on the console.
Brilliant choice. Yeah, it had to get a mention, really, didn't it? Like you say, and I'm very aware that I use this word way too much on this podcast, but it is iconic. It's an iconic racing game. Apparently, the physics were really quite revolutionary as well for the time. Like, it did feel like you were driving a car a bit, didn't it? It wasn't just like Outrun or something when it's just pixels, you're just moving from side to side, like Space Invaders or something. It actually had a bit of weight to it, and it looked good, and great car choices.
Well, the big thing for me, especially playing it in the arcade in and around this era, would be that I was 7 or 8 years old, absolutely obsessed with cars. Couldn't wait to be able to drive myself. So to have the opportunity to go in and actually, sit in the racing seat, and it still gives me a thrill now, even though I've obviously driven hundreds of thousands of miles now, myself. But it still gives me a thrill to think, I'm going to go over here and step into the old Delta Integrale for a couple of laps until I stove it in and run out of time. So it still gives me that that little twinkle of magic today when I see it in the arcade and stride over to it. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I don't think that ever fully fades, that buzz you get from sitting in an arcade racing game seat. So long may that continue.
Three, 2, 1, go! Easy right. Easy left. Easy right.
Okay, my final choice was, I think it's actually been ported to pretty much every gaming system around now. But I had it on the Amiga, of course, and it's Worms, the classic sort of turn-based fighting game, I suppose you would describe it. It was released for the Amiga in November 1995, created by TMNT and Ocean, two of the most 90s game developers, I think. I know TMNT is still going. I think they made Overcooked, that game that's on various platforms, which is a lot of fun. I'm not sure about Ocean. I'd probably not, but very 90s Amiga games developers.
Ocean have to be the most 90s. If we can fit in a bonus, what's the most 90s here?
Yeah,
they have to be the most 90s games studio, do they not?
I think
Acclaim, maybe.
Acclaim. Yeah, definitely.
Acclaim.
Yeah. Accolade, was that one called Accolade?
Accolade, yeah, definitely.
Sensible, but yes.
Well, we're going to have to parlay this up, aren't we? We can't just brush over this. We're going to have to do this properly now.
Yeah, we are. So it was made by Ocean and TMNT, and like I said, it's a turn-based thing. If anyone's not familiar with it, you'll probably have played a game that's based on a similar sort of mechanic, which is you take it in turns to move your character like backwards and forwards a little bit, and then you choose a weapon and try and aim it in such a way that it'll injure or damage your opponent's character. Or with Worms, you had a team, so you'd have, I think, 4 or 5 players on your team, and you would take it in turns to go through them. Had lots of amusing weapons in Worms. We actually had, and I'm being a bit cheeky because we had Worms Director's Cut, which came out in '97, but it was a development of Worms, which came out in '95. So again, I'm bending the rules, but I'm having it. And Director's Cut had some especially funny weapons like the priceless Ming vase, which you would place next to your opponent, and then it would explode and shatter into devastating pieces. The Holy Hand Grenade, of course, which I think was inspired by Monty Python, and the old lady who would sort of toddle over to your opponent and then explode in their face. So lots of funny stuff like that, and also great sound effects. And a lot of fun. And I think Worms might be one of the, well, I'm confident in saying it's one of the greatest ever multiplayer party games. You know, up there with Mario Kart and FIFA and stuff. I think it's the best game to play when you're with your friends, even if you're, you know, a bit older, maybe you do it with some drinks or something, or if you're a kid. It's just got that sort of simple playability. The competitiveness is great. I remember playing it at uni as well, so I was still playing it almost 10 years later. It never got boring, so that's why I had to choose it, really. It's an iconic game that has gone across all platforms, and I think it's still being made in various forms to this day. So there you go.
I think that's the mark of a game's playability, and if you're still playing it that much later, like I still dip into Championship Manager 2001, 2002 to this day. So that's clearly a mark of a great game. Again, I'm disappointed to say, I always come across really badly in these episodes because more often than not, you've played all the games that I pick, and then I've never played the games that you pick. So Worms, unfortunately, wasn't one that ever got into the collection on any console for us. But I've obviously heard of it, and I know about it, and I appreciate its place in the pantheon of great 90s games. And I'm glad you've mentioned it for sure.
Oh, no, I mean, that's fun. That's why we need to have both of us presenting this show, because we cover different areas. And yeah, I mean, I've never played FIFA 96, so there you go. We're stronger than the sum of our parts. No, that's not the phrase, is it? Is it?
Yeah, I think it is. Well, we'll take it anyway. Yeah, that's all right.
We exceed the sum of our parts, something like that. You know what we mean.
Okay,
you might not agree. You might not agree, but you know what we mean.
I'm soothed by that. Okay, thank you.
So they are our 6 choices for our favourite games from the decade. We hope you enjoyed listening to our choices, but of course, needless to say, we would love to hear what your choices are. So please do get in touch with us and give us your, 3 or 4 or 5, however many you want to tell us about, and also let us know why and why the games mean something to you. That's always nice to know. And you can get in touch with us on our link tree, which is linktr.ee/allright90s podcast, 90, which is 90s. There is a link in the episode description, of course, so you can click on that. Leads to all of our social media channels and all the different places you can listen to us on. Stu, we do know what we're going to be talking about next time, don't we?
Yes. So in addition to our plea for your 1995 video games memories, we're still on the lookout for your primary school story. So our next episode is going to be on attending primary school in the 90s. We want the good, the bad, and the ugly of your anecdotes from your primary school days. Do write in and let us know. We'll be happy to read them out. We'll keep everything fully anonymous to protect the innocent. But yes, our next episode is going to be on primary school memories of the 90s.
Well, that wraps us up for today then. That's the games of 1995 covered. There will be future episodes on the rest of the years of the decade. We might have to get some outside help for some of the early years of the decade, I think, Stu, just because it's so early in our gaming.
Absolutely. I'm sure we can find someone.
Yeah. But until next week, when we will be attending primary school once again, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me. I'm just off to find my nearest Sega Rally Championship cabinet.
Goodbye.
Bye for now. Well, do you want to do the giveaway package first? In lieu of correspondence. Are you drinking whiskey?